It's a real pleasure to be here. As Caroline said, it's a sort of a pre-celebration of International Women's Day, and I pay tribute especially to all the Turkish and especially Kurdish women in this country. But I would especially like to pay tribute to all the Kurdish women who are living in southeast Turkey. Democracy, the rule of law, fundamental freedoms, I believe, are not respected as they should be throughout the whole country of Turkey. But when I was in, forgive my pronunciation, Diyarbakir? Diyarbakir, 2 weeks ago, I have to say that I found that there was a complete violation of freedoms in Kurdish areas. And, I mean, freedom of speech is something, it's quite simple really, isn't it? It's something that we cherish here. But I was in a meeting with a co-mayor, because they have this great system of mayors, you have to have a man and a woman, I think that's terrific. But the wonderful woman with whom we were speaking, she is at the moment being investigated. She's already been in prison once, but she might go back to prison. Why? Because she deigned to speak in public about the need to have some decentralised system of government in Turkey. And so she might go to prison for that. And indeed, I think of the elected representatives in that part of Turkey, there are 24 who are currently in prison. And there are another sort of 30 under investigation. And it is just so appalling. But I met some remarkable women in that place. Amongst, I mean, you could smell the fire of the shells in the buildings. You could hear the guns going off all the time. And people living there are just so very brave. We met MPs, male and female MPs. We met, as I said, the co-mayor. We met fantastic women who belong to something called the Free Women's Congress, who do a great job for women all over Turkey, but especially in Kurdish areas. But we also met mothers, because in that area of Turkey, they have curfews at the moment. Since the peace talks fell apart last April, last May, there have been 57 curfews in that part of Turkey. At the moment, I think there's still 5, one of which is in an area called Sur, which is part of Diyarbakir. And they have now been under curfew, that area, for 92 days. I mean, curfew, you think, well, in our terms, you think that people can come and go, but they have to be home by 6 o'clock in the evening. But no, curfew there means that you are there behind barbed wire. You cannot leave if you're in the curfew area. We met with the governor who said that he sends food in so that people aren't starving. Well, that's great, isn't it? But if you're ill, you can't get out. The government, the state, believe that everybody living in the curfew areas are terrorists, i.e. People who are either affiliated to or supporters of the PKK. Indeed, there may well be people there who are supporters of the PKK, and there are people doing things that they shouldn't be doing, building barricades, this and that and the other. But it doesn't mean to say that the state shouldn't respect fundamental human rights. It's got an obligation to adhere to, all the UN obligations in terms of human rights. And so, yes, I believe that the Turkish state have got a right to deal with terrorism, etc. But it has to do so in a proportionate way. There are 2,000 people at the moment living in this particular curfew area. And we negotiated, well, a colleague from the European Parliament who's an expert in Turkey, she was a sort of chief negotiator that day, and she got the governor, we talked to people at the highest level in the European Union, and we got the governor to agree to allow 6 people out of the curfew area that day. People, the mothers, and people, we'd met the people and said, we went to the governor and said, these people need to get their relatives out, some elderly people, some of the babies. 6 people were allowed out, one of whom died on the way to hospital because she was in such need of medical care. So it's a terrible, terrible situation, and there has to be a ceasefire. The PKK have to stop what they're doing in those areas, and the government have to stop the curfews. There has to be a ceasefire, and I believe that here, I mean, living outside of Turkey, obviously in another part, in the European Union, we are all friends of Turkey. We want Turkey to thrive. We want Turkey to be not just a good neighbour, but we want to have a great relationship with Turkey. But as a friend of Turkey, I think we also have a responsibility to be a critical friend. And so we have to say to Turkey, the state, hey, you've got to ensure that there's a ceasefire in these areas. We have a meeting with NGOs, not just NGOs, with human rights NGOs. You'd expect them to be sort of saying these things have got to stop, but we met with business people, we met with trade unions, we met with doctors and nurses, all of whom were saying the same things. And if you get this widest representative part of the society all saying the same things, you think things have got to happen. So what we want to do, we've got to say to Turkey, you've got to stop all these curfews, we want a ceasefire. Also, you've got to get back to the negotiating table. You, Turkish state, and the PKK have got to get round the table again and try to find a peaceful solution. Violence is not the answer. You've got to find a peaceful solution. Until the talks fell apart last year, things were happening, things were getting better in these areas. It shows that it can be done. And I understand that the Turkish foreign minister, I don't know if it's the current one, but a Turkish foreign minister not too long ago, was actually involved in getting a peace agreement in the Philippines. So if they know how to do it. So if they can do it in the Philippines, they can do it in Turkey, I would have thought. So as I say, as a critical friend, we've got to say to Turkey, hell, you've got to do these things. You've also got to respect fundamental freedoms and human rights. We want you to be our partner in the European Union. They're having a terrible time in Turkey. I know, they've got war on their borders, they've got the refugee crisis. That notwithstanding, you've got to respect all of these fundamental freedoms and human rights, because that is a mark of a civilised society, and that is a mark of a country with whom the European Union wants to deepen its relationship. But I don't think we should be deepening our relationship until they respect these freedoms. Thank you.